With 3 teams leaving the NALCS at the end of the 2019 summer split, and all NALCS teams failing to make a profit, the state of the LCS is a disaster. When you start to calculate the finances and give a rough estimate to how much revenue these teams are bringing in, things are starting to look a whole lot worse. In today's video, we're going to talk about the eSports bubble, teams leaving, and how bad the situation really is with a quick gauge. Let's get started. Part 1. The Permanent Partnership Promise. Riot Games promised permanent partnership. For those of you who don't remember, permanent partnership was a solution to stop the revolving door of teams from coming in to the LCS and coming out of the LCS at the end of each split from getting knocked out. The sell was that this was supposed to increase the overall stability within the league so that way it could bring in more investors. Furthermore, it was seen as a screening process to prevent bad companies, such as Meet Your Makers, from entering the league. In the early years, if you remember, there were a lot of very come and go teams. Teams like Team 8, there was Coast, there was Good Game University, who were legitimately bad. And then you had teams like Vulcan, who were quite good, but despite the fact being as good as they were, with one bad split, they would be gone. So the idea of permanent partnership made sense because those good teams like Vulcan and stuff like that, even though if they had one bad split, they could still stay in and then recover, so that way their investment would be more intact. In the 2018 season of the NALCS, all the teams came, they signed up, and it seemed like everything was working quite well. However, by the end of 2019, the summer split, then 3 teams are now leaving. These teams are EchoFox, Optic Gaming, and Clutch Gaming are all leaving their spots and selling at the exact same time. Let's get into why. Part 2. Big trouble, little revenue. According to Rich from H2K, teams in the LCS all pool their money together, and this is divided equally amongst them to bring in the revenue. At the same time, Riot Games takes a massive slice that's heavily skewed in their favor of this money that's being brought in. So let's give an example. If I bring in $100 and I'm a team in the LCS and the other 9 teams bring in 0, then every single team, including myself, would get $10. This can cause a little bit of a problem. So let's look at it from Riot's perspective to begin. Riot has 5 sponsors in the NALCS season and playoffs. These are Rocket Mortgage, which is a subsidiary of Quicken Loans. They have Honda, the car company. They have Alienware. They have Secretlab, who makes gaming chairs, and they have State Farm. There are 5 sponsors, and please remember that 5, it will be an important number later on in this video. So, how much revenue is actually being brought in? When you look at companies like State Farm, or you look at Alienware, or you look at the Quicken Loan subsidiary Rocket Mortgage, the numbers are hard to really find out. However, when you take a look at Secretlab, the gaming chair company, you can start to get a feel of what it actually is bringing into the LCS and about what the other teams are paying. So, let's do that. A quick internet search will reveal that Secretlab's revenue for 2018 was $15 million. Now, that is quite small, and that puts it in the range of a small cap company in the United States. Now, why this matters is because you can get an idea of how much it's going to spend on marketing. The magic number for marketing, if you do another quick Google search, reveals that it's about 10%. That means 10% of 15 million is 1.5 million, which is spent on marketing. Now, let's assume that all goes to sponsoring different types of games, and Secretlab does not only sponsor the LCS. It sponsors PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, it sponsors Dota, and it sponsors a bunch of other games and people. But let's assume half of that money goes to the NALCS alone. That means it's $750,000. This $750,000 seems about right. According to Rich from H2K, during his podcast with Thorin and Loco, the Listen Loco show, low sponsorships are about $200,000, while high sponsorships are about $800,000. So, in a best case scenario, each team gets about $75,000. $750,000 divided by 10 is $75,000. But that is actually quite unrealistic when you listen to the other part Rich was saying. That part is that Riot takes a big skew of this money. So even if Riot were to take 50%, half of the amount, teams are getting about $37,500 per sponsor. Remember, I said 5 was a very important number. When you multiply that number by 5, the $75,000, at the absolute most in an unrealistic world where Riot takes no money, is that teams are getting $375,000 at best from all 5 of the sponsorships mentioned above. The reason why I say that is because Secretlab is in the same advertising space as Alienware, as Honda, as Rocket Mortgage, and as State Farm, as in they have the same little banner that they're sharing. So I'm assuming that they're paying about the same. Now, with a 50% cut, that means each team, more realistically, is making $187,500. Now, that is not very good. If you look at the Forbes article, in 2018, the average player's salary was $320,000. That means with all of the sponsorship money that Riot has brought into the league, they are not even able to pay one player's salary. So you might say to me, well, T-Bone, what about the other side? What about what the LCS teams are bringing in? Now, when I looked at this, I saw 21 different sponsors on the team's jerseys when they were broadcasting during the normal LCS season and the playoffs. These sponsors were Nissan, BMW, Puma, Red Bull, AT&T, Microsoft, Dr. Pepper, Lenovo, Honda, Monster, Rocket Mortgage, and then there were smaller companies. I'm going to count Bilibili, the Chinese streaming service, as a smaller company, Gamerfuel, Squarespace, Logitech, Alienware, HyperX, Razer, Corsair, Rig, and the Cash App as smaller companies. So what that means is that there are 11 large companies and 10 smaller sponsors. So if you do the math, with the average player costing $320,000 plus a coach, the amount of money it takes to operate a team in the NALCS is $19,200,000. Do all these sponsors actually cover it? Let's find out. So, with 11 sponsors paying $800,000, the max is what Rich said, that gives us $8,800,000, plus $4 million from the 10 smaller sponsors. Now that means it's $12,800,000, and that would be divided 10 separate ways. And that would give each team $1.28 million. But you also have to remember that Riot takes a hand from everything. So how much would that be? If Riot takes a hand, the same amount, 50% from the sponsorships that the teams bring in, that means they're getting $640,000 plus the $187,500 from Riot, meaning the total amount of revenue they brought in from all of the sponsors, big and small, is going to be about $827,500 per team. This is less than half of covering the cost of player salaries, which is why it starts to make sense that H2K Rich is saying that it's getting insane. How is it getting insane? Is because there's all of these investors throwing in money thinking that this is a cheap, quick loss that will eventually make them millions down the road. But when you look at the math right now, the amount of revenue being brought in isn't enough to even pay for half of the team. On top of that, teams have to pay $10 million for the buy-in slot. They also have to pay for staff. They have to pay for content production, right? Making YouTube videos, doing recording, editing. They have to do sales. There's the entire infrastructure of each team, not just the approximate $2 million required just to run the very, very base team of 5 players and a coach with no subs, right? And then what's get even crazier is that some teams will be paying $30 million, like what happened with Rick Fox. So when you look at it all, it really looks bad. What this quick leave from 3 teams, 30% of the teams, is saying is that this doesn't look very profitable. And it isn't very profitable. Teams have to triple the amount of revenue coming in just to cover a very, very base salary for the 5 players and 1 coach. On top of that, that doesn't even begin to cover the $10 million, $13 million, or $30 million buy-in that teams have to still pay in a couple of years. Like, the amount of sponsorship that needs to come in needs to increase multiple folds just for teams to even break even. And then on top of that, they have to pay this extra money. Like, holy cow, like, how the fuck are they going to pay for it? Like, I can see why some teams, like FaZe, what Banks was saying, like Rich was saying for H2K, chose not to get into the LCS, chose not to get into these Overwatch leagues because it doesn't make sense. The amount of revenue coming in just isn't there. It just isn't there. And because of that, investors should really be pumping the brakes. Riot should be looking for solutions so that way they can create long-term partnerships. Because if this league fails, the LCS with the highest view numbers, the Overwatch League fails, honestly, it's going to be a very hard blow to the esports industry in general. So that's all for this video. If you liked this video, give it a like. If you disliked it, leave some comments below and give it a like anyway. Thanks, and have a nice day.